All right, welcome to the equine biology and anatomy session. Horses are both amazing animals that they are so flexible and so agile for how large they are, but there are some flaws in their anatomy. If you want to discover a really neat, it's a very long video, I'm going to just tab over for 1 second, but the Discovery Channel makes a good video called Inside Nature's Giants on racehorses, where they perform a necropsy on a racehorse. All right, let's start with the basics. They're hooved, they're endothermic, they are single-toed or odd number toed, as we discussed with the taxonomy, and during the 3 years to 12 years is their prime, and it says horses can live into their 20s, but with the right nutrition and the right taken care of, you can have a horse, I think, up to about 30 years old. I've seen quite a lot of horses in that range, and even I think the oldest horse was somewhere in the age of 50. So, they are very smart, even though they have some flaws with their intelligence, and it has to do more with how they perceive things. But they are able to read our body language, and when they say they have the sixth sense, I believe that has a lot to do with why they make such good therapeutic animals for either autism kids, and that's another thing to look into. There is a great organization. Give me 1 second, I'm going to find it. There it is. I found it back in our animal-human bond PowerPoint, the horseboy method. So this was a rescue that I worked with in Aspen, and I guess it was a rescue more for the animals, but then they took the horses and they supported veterans with PTSD and also children with autism. Moving on to their hearing. Their hearing is great. Their ears do rotate and they move towards the direction in which they are trying to hear. It is a major thing we are going to watch for when we are looking for their behavior, when we're handling them and restraining them. Their ears are one of their greatest communicators along with their body language. They will often move their ears, stiffen their neck, and then change their head position when they're trying to communicate something. Okay, here it comes, the eyesight. So they are monocular, whereas we are biocular. Their two blind spots are directly in front of them and directly behind them. So monocular, when they are looking at you from one side and you're moving your hand, say you're on the left side, if you switch over to the right side and you start moving your hand, they're not going to have those two signals connect because they did not see them with both eyes because of the way their blind spot is. The shading part over the pupil is called the corpora nigra. Refreshing from our digestive system. They are herbivores. They are not ruminants, but they are hind gut fermenters. Pardon me, hind gut fermenters. The cecum is a huge part of their digestive system. It is where the fermentation happens. They do not have the gallbladder because gallbladder is meant to store bile from the liver. So horses meaning to be a trickle feeder, they constantly need to be producing bile if they are trickle feeding and not store it. Now, sometimes this does not work when we feed our horses on a 12-hour schedule, once in the morning and once at night. So if possible, horses do need to have access to hay or some sort of roughage all the time. And we will get into another reason on why that is very important. They cannot vomit. And When we are listening for sounds in the hindgut, we are listening for 1 to 2 borborygmi sounds per minute. The cecum kind of sounds like the flushing of a toilet, and if you hear these high-pitched tympanic sounds, that's gas. We can only palpate for the pelvic flexure, which is often a spot of impaction colic, but we also have to be careful when we're palpating in the rectum because there's the risk of the rectal tear. Here is an image based on that. We're going to talk about the artery that supports the entire large bowel. So that is a very common artery. It's called the cranial mesenteric artery. It does support every part of the intestine, and there is a parasite called a large strongyle that will reside there and cause a aneurysm or a thrombolytic aneurysm. Throm means clot, so pretty much by this worm residing in the large bowel, it's large enough to make a clot. If you play this puzzle, I had an ed puzzle, but do think about these questions as you watch this video. We need to know more about this parasite, this strongyle that I've talked about. Strongyle. How long it lives in the environment, because this plays a part in how often we pick up the feces or manure. And we also don't want to do parasite refugia, which is where parasites are becoming resistant to the deworming structures that we are giving them. So more about the cecum, because it's a very important part. It does provide a good heat source, but it also provides lots of vitamins and volatile fatty acids. There are places that colic usually occurs in the large intestine. So one is at the ileocecal junction, one is at the pelvic flexure, and the other part is when the large colon has to transition up into the small colon. Hay is not very good at making turns. All right, watch this video. I want you to think about some questions first. We discussed a little bit about the teeth and what is the term for what we need to do to the teeth. Also, moving to the stomach, there are 2 parts of the stomach. What 2 parts are those? Why are they significant? And what do we need to do to help and aid those 2 parts of the stomach? More questions to think about. Where does absorption and what nutrients take place in what part of the small intestine and the large intestine? And then since we cannot, through our normal stomach and small intestine, which are the same for us essentially as it is for a horse, we can absorb some nutrients, but we cannot break down cellulose, which is the fiber in plant material. So we do need microbes to do that, and that happens in the cecum, and that is the fermentation. All right, next we're going to get into the biology of the bones after the stomach. So there are one breed of horse, the Arabian, that actually has one less set of ribs and vertebral the vertebrae, because our thoracic vertebrae connects to our ribs. So we can see here that it is the very distal phalanges that a horse is standing on. When we break down the soft tissue structures of the hoof, this is very important for reasons and lameness, and also has to do with where we are putting blocks with our lidocaine, our sodium channel blockers, to determine where is the point of lameness. If we start putting a block down here, because this is where the hoof line is, we can't necessarily get lower, then we can rule out if it is happening, the lameness is happening because of the hoof. And then we move up the blocks to try to rule out what joint or what area is the horse becoming lame. Go ahead, take a moment right now. You have a skeletal diagram. Fill that out as much as you can based on your memory of anatomy, and then check it with the answers here. And I just want to point out that there are often two names for things. So we call this the first phalange, P1, also the long pastern. Then we have the short pastern, and then we have the coffin bone, which is P3, or the distal phalange. We also call the metacarpal bone or metatarsal bone the cannon bone. Then there is a split bone, which is technically metacarpal's number, depending on if it's medial or lateral. And we number from 5 being lateral, but there is no 5. That's a vestigial thing. So if it was lateral, it'd be 4. And then metacarpal 3 is the cannon bone. And then metacarpal 2 is on the medial side, because the thumb, should a horse have a thumb or a dew claw, that would be, the thumb is 1. VA duty. So first off, in our lab, we are going to be doing some grooming and brushing. This is great for bonding with a horse. They also need to help their oils from their coat spread over their fur. Knowing grooming equipment is essential, so all of these have a purpose and where they are applied. The most important piece of grooming will have to do with the hoof pick, and no hoof, no horse. So we're going to go into how hooves are continuously growing. They are a nail. Here's a good depiction of how the hoof actually sits around the P3, and some problems or problematic things that can happen with the hoof should there not be taken care of. This measures some angle, and so that has to do with farriers, and the farrier is the person who takes care of the hoof. Take a moment, think about these. So as you watch this video, you'll notice that in other countries they call the farrier the blacksmith, and it is a trained professional. Moving on to equine behavior. But before we get into the behavior, quiz time. Get your boards ready. Did this breed make it into your breed discussion board? It is very much known for its beautiful color. It is the golden horse. All right, going into equine behavior. They are a herd animal. They do love their buddies. There is a hierarchy in the herd, so there is usually a top ranking. Now, depending if it's a herd or a band, if it's a band, it's a stallion in there, but if it's a herd, it's a mixture of maybe Gallions and geldings and mares. Very rarely can there be more than one stallion because they tend to spar and fight. And that also has to do with the behavior of a stallion. So if you have a stallion that's a little bit nippy or likes to paw at you, it's very good to try to correct those behaviors. But if you were to, let's say, smack the horse, that could send a mixed signal, and all of a sudden that stallion could be like, yay, this is what I wanted, now we're going to spar, because that's how they would do that in the wild. So they're very suspicious in nature. They are always thinking that something is out to get them. So please remember that when you're working around them because they are a prey species. Very different from working with our canines and our felines. So if you are nervous working around them, they're going to detect that, and that's not going to make for a very safe situation. So if you're nervous, the best thing to be is to actually be to stand away from the horse and not be close to them, because they're going to constantly be trying to move away from you, unsure of why you're so nervous, but it's also going to feed off to them, and they're thinking that if you're nervous, does that mean a lion's coming to get us? Should they be nervous? And normal behaviors can also be dangerous. So they do like to do normal things like run and kick around, and that can be severely dangerous. So I just can't emphasize enough that this horse, as powerful as it is, could end your life. So safety is of the utmost importance around them. If their normal behavior is to back up out of the way because they're afraid of something happening in front of them and you're behind them, that is a 1,000-pound animal, and I cannot emphasize how important it is to be very cautious of your behavior, of their behavior. Yours too. So, the human-horse relationship is based on respect and trust. Now, to talk about respect in the hierarchy of the herd, so the head mare, or the head gelding, if that's so the case, usually it's the mares, but they're going to get their respect. And sometimes how they do that is by their body language. So let's say we're at the feeding trough and the head mare gets to be the one to eat first. And normally we feed in many groupings so that we don't have fighting or they get to eat individually. But let's say they are eating together. The head mare will first start to maybe put her ears back. Then she might move her head like she's going to nip at the horse if they still haven't got away. Then she might bite, then she might turn and kick. Eventually, all it takes is the first step where the horse has to make the first behavior symbol of putting her ears back, and the other horse will not come to get near them. This works very much with training. When you're trying to work with training a horse and gaining their respect, you have to put yourself as the head person of the hierarchy. Now, this is not meant to be like you're dominating the horse and you're beating the horse. No, you're sending them signals through your body language that you are the boss, because technically, if you are not the boss, they are the 1,000-pound animal and they're thinking that they can just bite at you and kick at you, and that is very dangerous for you as a person. So, in essence, it's almost a must that we put ourselves as the hierarchy, and they do need to listen to us. And I'm not trying to be tough or stern or anything like that. It's strictly a matter of safety, for your safety. Speaking of all the things that they can do that can be dangerous to us, there is a certain range of kill zones. So when you walk behind a horse, you need to be either right up next to him, so if they do kick, the impact is not so bad, or you need to be at least 10 feet away from them. Well, let's talk about behaviors when they're relaxed. We're going to see a relaxed body posture. They'll possibly have their leg cock. They may be licking and chewing at their lips. Their head posture is relaxed. Now let's talk about the behavior when they're trying to say that they're angry. Anger can also be fear. Sometimes if they cannot flight because they are a prey species, they will fight. So this is a very good example of the ears back. There is a lot of tension in the face. They can also flick their tail as bad as bare their teeth, stomping and kicking. Fear can also be very dangerous. The tail is a huge indicator of how they are feeling along with their ears. So if it's calm and relaxed, it'll be in a natural position. If it's moving around, they could be nervous. Straight down actually could be pain, or sometimes that happens when they're sleeping. And if it's clamped, it's held tight. But when it's up, they're usually very excited. And excitement is a normal behavior, but this could be very dangerous about approaching this horse. I just mentioned briefly about the licking of the lips. That means that they're thinking, they're understanding, they're calm, they're relaxed, yawning, grimacing. There's actually like a grimace scale for horses on how they can hold their mouths. So grooming of other horses, I'm going to focus on this because sometimes as you're grooming the horse, this is how you can bond and let them know you are a safe individual. Find the good spots to scratch, like maybe it's by their withers or up on their neck. Some horses are head shy and don't like to be touched around their ears, so maybe behind their ears is not the right place to touch. It just depends. There's been this thing called an ear twitch that's being used less often. I'll talk about that with restraint because twitch is the term that we are going to use in restraint. But if they head shy, they don't like scratching behind the ears as our dogs and our cats do. Some of these behaviors are very natural, but they can be dangerous. Pawing. Pawing is something that some horses will do, and if they get attention or get rewards for it, then they continue to paw. So that's more of a training thing, but it can still be dangerous because they have a lot of power behind their hoof. I can't enforce enough that even though these are normal behaviors, they can be dangerous. What do you think about all of these animals? Did that guy get the right signs of warning from the horse? Did you see the very quick ears back in a second from this horse before he kicked? I have two videos that you can watch that talk about one is of or talk about horse kicking. So go ahead and watch those so you can see some behaviors. And then we're going to observe this behavior of this stallion. And what is he thinking as you watch this? Watch this video on behavior basics because it will be putting a lot of our standards in place and our objectives because this behavior basic goes into handling of the horse. So one thing I did not mention is what do they say when they're talking about the horse's vision and how their head and body position are in relation to their vision. Twice they mention a word that starts with the letter A. Please be ready to answer this word. What do you need to do when thinking about behavior and restraint with a horse? Starts with the letter A. Okay, let's get back to our objectives that we need to cover based on biology and behavior. So, distinguishing equine behaviors, you should be able to do that. And describe how the hierarchy affects behavior of individual animals within a herd of the horse. Next, describe those ones are going to be when we talk about reproduction. And then list 3 common stable vices or repetitive behaviors in a horse. One that I did not mention, that's why it's always good to come back to the objectives, is cribbing is what it's called. It's where a horse will bite onto something, it will arch its neck, and it will like suck back with air. And we can put devices on them so that they are not able to crib. So We can probably describe the physical abilities of a horse and how they might affect the way in which they are handled based on that last video that we watched. But we are going to move into restraint. That will be a different one where we will learn how to apply restraint techniques.